All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're diving deep into a report that lays out the huge climate challenges facing one of the most famous, most beautiful regions in the world, the Mediterranean. And believe me, this isn't just about your summer holiday getting a bit warmer. We're talking about the very future of a region that's really on the edge. You know, the warning signs have been there for a while. Think back to the 1990s. A massive, 5-year drought hit the region hard. It was a real wake-up call. It showed everyone just how fragile the whole system is and how incredibly sensitive it is to big shifts in climate. That event really set the stage for everything we're worried about today.
So, that begs the question, why this specific region? What makes the Mediterranean a hotspot for climate change? Well, let's break down exactly why this iconic sea is so uniquely vulnerable and, why it's considered to be on such a knife's edge.
To really get it, you have to look at the situation on the ground before climate change started kicking into high gear. I mean, the Mediterranean isn't starting with a clean slate here. This is a place that naturally gets almost zero rain in the summer. Water scarcity? That's already a chronic, everyday problem. Then you throw in 350 million people, land that's already turning to desert, and coastlines packed with towns and cities. It's like a perfect storm of vulnerability, and that's before you add a rapidly changing climate on top.
Okay, so if the region is already so vulnerable, what's the forecast? This is where we get to the hard numbers. These are the scientific projections that are basically the first domino to fall in what could be a very long chain of consequences.
And the first number is a big one, a projected temperature increase of 4 degrees Celsius over many of the inland areas by the year 2100. Now, to put that in perspective, that is way higher than the global average. This isn't just things getting a little toasty, it's a massive shift in the climate over the land.
And if the heat wasn't enough, the second number is just as jarring, a potential 40% drop in annual rainfall for some of the driest parts of the region, like North Africa and southeastern Spain. So let that sink in. The places that are already struggling the most for water are projected to get so much drier. And here it is, the final part of this 1-2-3 punch, a potential sea level rise of nearly 1 meter by 2100. For a region whose entire identity is tied to its coastline, with ancient cities and entire cultures built right on the water's edge. Well, this is a monumental threat.
But here's the thing, these impacts aren't going to be spread out evenly. There's a really clear divide. If you're north of the 45th parallel, you might actually see a bit more rain in the winter, but the extra heat could just cause it to evaporate anyway. Now, if you're south of that line, the outlook is much worse, a huge drop in rain and way more intense droughts. So yeah, the whole region is at risk, but the southern coast is really facing an acute crisis.
So, what happens when these things, the heat, the drought, the rising seas, actually start to happen? Well, that's what we call the domino effect. It's how a hotter, drier climate kicks off a chain reaction of environmental problems, and it all starts with the land itself. And that chain reaction leads to something called desertification. It's a technical term, but it basically means land in dry areas becomes degraded. It turns to desert. A hotter, drier climate doesn't just put more land at risk, it speeds the whole process up. We're talking more soil washing away, more salt poisoning the land and water, and a much higher risk of wildfires. It could turn huge landscapes totally barren.
Which, of course, brings us to the most fundamental question of all. If the land is getting hotter and the rain is disappearing, what on earth happens to the most precious resource in the region? Where is the water going to come from?
The devastating truth is, from millions of people, it's already gone. You've got countries like Egypt, Libya, and Syria that are already living below the international line for what's called water scarcity. Climate change is on track to push them, and a lot of their neighbors, much deeper into crisis. And this has real, tangible effects on the food we eat. Just take a look at this one sobering example from the report. In a place called Kardista, in Greece, the combination of extreme heat and a lack of water means that by 2050, the chance of growing maize at today's levels could fall to nearly zero. Think about that. That's how a climate forecast turns into a food crisis, affecting everything from local farmers to the price of groceries across the continent.
So let's zoom out a bit and talk about the human cost. How do all these environmental changes actually translate into real-world risks for the health, the homes, and the security of the 350 million people who call this region home?
Well, the health risks are just everywhere, and they're all connected. Less food security leads to malnutrition.
Extreme heat and air pollution team up to cause breathing problems. Meanwhile, poor water quality can lead to diseases like cholera, and warmer weather lets mosquitoes carrying malaria and dengue fever move into new areas. It's like a cascading public health disaster.
And for the communities right on the coast, the threat is frankly existential. Famous crowded places like the Nile Delta and Venice are in serious trouble. A sea level rise of just half a meter, that's not even 2 feet, could swamp harbors, damage historic cities, and put critical things like power plants and water systems at huge risk.
And this is maybe the most crucial point, laid out right here by the IPCC. This isn't just about the environment, it's about people. We could see millions forced from their homes because the coastline is eroding, or their farms can no longer grow food. That could create a massive refugee crisis and totally upend the stability of the region.
So, after all that, what can be done? Is there a path forward? Well, the report really frames it as a stark choice, not just for the region, but for the whole world. Do we prepare to manage an unavoidable disaster, or do we act now to prevent the worst of it from ever happening?
And that really comes down to 2 different but equally important strategies. On one side, you've got adaptation. That's about managing the impacts we already know are coming, things like building better seawalls or finding smarter ways to manage water. On the other side, you've got mitigation. That's about fixing the root cause by making huge cuts to global greenhouse gas emissions. Basically, one treats the symptoms, the other tries to cure the disease. And we absolutely need to do both.
And that all leads us to the report's final, crystal-clear bottom line. First, climate change is a threat that could undo every bit of progress the region has made. Second, adapting locally is super important, but on its own, it's not nearly enough. And that leads to the big conclusion. The entire future of the Mediterranean depends on all of us, globally, taking serious action to cut emissions.
So, we're left with this one final, incredibly important question. We know what's at stake. We know what the science says. And we know that the fate of this historic, vital part of the world depends on fast, coordinated international action. The only question left to answer is, will it come in time?